Hey guys, happy early October. It's Evan. It's after work. I work in schools and man, those kids were draining my life force today. But anyways, I'm back in here just taking it easy, doing some water bowls today. And I thought that what I'd talk about today is something I talk about this time of year. Um, I've talked about it this time of year before, and that is understanding humidity in terms of keeping and how wet you should be keeping your boas, because I think it's one of the more misunderstood parameters of keeping, and I think that it's just something that I want to put this information out there again and again and again, and also talk about it in a little different ways and show little examples so that hopefully people that learn by different modalities can be picking up on this, because I actually have a really deeply experienced reptile friend, and he says that humidity is the least important parameter in reptile keeping. And I don't necessarily think that is true, but what I will tell you is that I think that most people over humidify their boas, and I think most people don't understand exactly what's going on. So to first answer your question, I'm going to answer the essential question, which is how wet should you be keeping your boas? And I'm going to say no wetter than this. These are all Amazon animals, so they're wet. The cages that are not as drippy are different species that require lower humidity, but this is as wet as you want to keep it. And what I wanted to do is use this example to segue into what I really want to talk today about, which is the idea of understanding and reading humidity in your collection without the use of the hygrometer, which is how you read humidity, like a thermometer, but for moisture. And the reason I don't keep hygrometers is because one, they're notoriously inaccurate and notoriously unreliable. I would recommend you get one if you're just starting off so you have an idea about it. But also, there are visual cues in a cage that will tell you how humid your cage is. And so this needs to be where we talk about relative humidity. And relative humidity means that the humidity is relative to the temperature. In other words, the amount of moisture that air can hold is relative to how warm it is. The warmer it is, the more moisture it can hold, and the cooler it is, the less moisture it can hold. That's why on like a cool morning, when you have warm days and a cool morning, you'll have dew on the grass. It's because when it's warmer during the days, you can the moisture is held in the air. So because warm air can hold more moisture, but then as the temperatures drop, all that moisture crashes out and lands on the ground because cool air can't hold quite as much moisture. So something similar is happening in these cages right now. So if you see, this is the warm side, it's under the heat panel. And this glass is not fogged up. I sprayed these cages yesterday. This is wetter than you want it full time, but my cages go through dry and wet cycles, and I sprayed yesterday, so that's where we are. But if you look over here, this side is dripping wet. And that's because this is the cool side and this is the warm side. And so relative, the air on this side, the warmer air can hold more moisture than the air on this side. And so it's both a combination of the fact that this is warmer, but also this glass is a pore insulator. So this front glass pane on the cool side is the coolest point in the cage, and that's where you're going to see condensation first. So I'd like to point out, like in here, where's that snake? I don't want to stick my hand in there if I know where it is. But if you look, these back walls on the cool side aren't really dripping at all. So this area up in here is very humid still, but it is not at 100%. Right here at the glass, we're at the dew point. So the temperature of the glass is below the temperature at which moisture will condensate on the glass. It's the same as if you like drinking a cup of ice water in the desert, it'll collect condensation even though it's wicked dry. That's what's happening on the inside, but there's pretty humid in here. But we're not at 100% humidity. So, and remember, this side, we're still not dripping wet, which is good because dripping wet conditions cause hygiene issues. Over here you can see, this is just because maybe the little bit of the air, it's a little cooler right here because that's where the crack in the door is. But over here, there is no moisture on glass or in the cage. And that is because it's warmer over there. So it's actually in an absolute sense, meaning that absolute humidity is measured by number of grams of water per meters cubed that air is holding. The absolute humidity is actually higher over here, but the relative humidity is lower than on this cool side because the temperature is warmer over there. So higher temperature, it's less close to the saturation point of the air over here, even though we know that it's moisture over there, because any of the moisture that would be condensating out of the air is actually still held in the air over here. So if your cages at their wettest look like this, where the glass on the cool side is condensating, but this side is not, what you can do is make an assumption that your temperatures, or you can make an assumption that the whole cage is very close to 100% humidity, but it's not at 100% humidity, because you don't actually want 100% humidity, because 100% humidity means dripping wet. So here you see the same thing, dry, wet, dry, wet. Dry on the warm side, wet on the cool side. Here's actually kind of, I would call this perfect. If my cages could look like this cage 80% of the time, where it's dry, 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 and just a little bit of condensating in the farthest corner, that's how I would say I like my cages pretty much 80% of the time. Excursions wetter and excursions drier are fine, but that's how I'd like to see them all the time. And so that's how you can measure and read the humidity in your cages without a hygrometer. It's actually much more practical and much more accurate over time if you have these understandings. And then beyond that, the other thing I would tell you about humidity is that you don't actually want it like dripping wet in the cage most of the time. It's okay to have condensation as long as you're going through dry cycles too, but dripping wet all the time creates hygiene issues, creates fetid conditions, creates fungus gnat outbreaks, creates ammonia smelling conditions when they pee, creates respiratory infections, creates unhappiness. So that's a big thing, is I think a lot of people, especially when they're new, are saying, oh, my cage is dripping wet, yay, congratulations, I'm at 100%. No, actually you're at over 100%. You're dank and fetid. So really you should be walking the line where if you have some condensation on the glass and you understand that that's because it's cooler in the room than in the cage, and really what's happening is the glass is cool and it's condensating on that like a cup of ice water, but the rest of the cage is not dripping wet, that's about perfect. And so that's just what I tell you. And the other thing I'll tell you is that the reason my really experienced friend, he's way more experienced than I am, talks about humidity being the least important parameter, is because really humidity in and of itself is really attending to the internal hydration of the animal, meaning that your animal, as long as it's got proper internal hydration, is healthy. It's just that higher humidity species tend to have poor internal hydration when they are kept at a lower humidities. So it is true that like a casual bad shed might be because the air is kind of dry. I'd say it's more likely that you have yourself in a open topped cage setup with some sort of convective drying, which is why you're getting those bad sheds. But the reality is good shedding is really more a function of internal hydration. That's one point my friend I think would make. I haven't actually asked him to explain too far into it, but I think that's the point you make. And I think the other point he would make is that if you're setting up your cages properly, they can have relatively low ambient humidity, but still have microenvironments where they can always access high humidity. So that's why, I don't know if you've noticed, I've talked about this before, I always have humid high boxes in all my cages. These racks have humid high boxes. So even though this is relatively dry, they can always access 100% humidity. Even if I don't have a box in there, I just put box in there. I'm trying to find an example of one where I don't have one. Here. Like this cage, I don't have a humid hide box in here, but what I do have is a plastic hide box and I water under there, and so that's a humid microenvironment. So there's things like that, but the understanding is both that ambient humidity and relative humidity is less important than absolute humidity, and also that it is less important than internal hydration, and also that you can have a relatively dry environment and also still attend to and provide microenvironments that are at 100%, so they can always access that all the time. So see here, these all have microenvironments that are wet, those humid hide boxes. But that's just an idea that I'd like to harp on over and over and over again, because I think it's important, I think it's slippery, and I think it's misunderstood. I've explained it also in my boa breeding tips videos. And other than that, I'm just gonna show you the gory underbelly of reptile keeping. This is me midweek torn up just doing water changes. So I think I'm gonna be less abashed about just showing the reality of keeping, and I'm never ashamed of what's going on in here because I keep pretty high standards, but I think that a lot of people are a little more into heavily curating their videos, but I would like to show this in reality. So this is kind of what's going on here. This is what's going on in my back rooms over here. You know, so we're gonna come in here and do water bowls later. So that's just what's going on. I hope that all makes sense to you, and take care. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Oh, dirty laundry, don't look at that.